Hola, hola, sí. Probando, uno, dos. Uno, dos. Hola, hola.
Hola, hola, aquí estamos listos. ¿Sí?
Sí, estamos haciendo una prueba por el
Sí.
canal de inglés.
Ah, bueno, perfecto.
Ok. ¿Listo? Ok. Bueno.
Ujú.
Buenos días. Nos permitimos informar que en breves minutos daremos inicio a la Asamblea General Ordinaria de Accionistas de la Bolsa de Valores de Colombia.
En 3 minutos. Entonces, ¿qué? ¿Quieres comenzar?
Sí, vamos a comenzar y después que viene el nitty gritty, viene aquí la experta.
Sí, cómo no. ¿Cómo no?
No, tú sí eres un experto.
Mm,
Si no lo puedo, es como el que
En breves momentos daremos inicio formal a la Asamblea General Ordinaria de Accionistas de la Bolsa de Valores de Colombia. Gracias.
Muy buenos días a todos. Damos un saludo muy especial a todos los señores accionistas que nos acompañan el día de hoy. Vamos a dar inicio a la Asamblea General.
Good morning and welcome. We will now start the Ordinary General Assembly of the Colombia Stock Exchange. Dr. Mauricio Rosillo and all the other members of the Board of Directors, Dr. Gloria Maecha Garcia of KPMG, External Auditor, and all of those attending this assembly, welcome. Now I give the floor to Dr. Mauricio Rosillo as Chairman of the Board of Directors. Thank you, Dr. Cordova. Good morning to all. To all the members of the Board of Directors, Dr. Cordova, Dr. Belandia, Dr. Gloria Maecha, External Auditor from KPMG, all our shareholders, please receive a cordial greeting, a welcome, and thank you for your attendance to this Ordinary Shareholders Assembly 2021. Now we formally open this assembly of the Colombia Stock Exchange shareholders. Dr. Belandia, please inform about the quorum of those attending right now. Good morning, shareholders. May I inform you that at the start of the assembly, 36,727,000 shares equivalent to 60.69% are present, and consequently we have a sufficient quorum to deliberate. In the need to facilitate the mechanisms to avoid the risk of COVID-19, it is appropriate to hold the shareholders assembly in a virtual manner. For this reason, we will proceed to briefly explain how the platform works that will allow the voting of the proposals to be submitted to the shareholders. For this virtual assembly, we will use a platform that is designed to facilitate the voting. However, it is necessary for you to have an adequate internet connection, and it also should be noted that we need to have your email. You should use the same email that you used at the time of registration, because in this way we can send you a message in case of an emergency or contingency. Please also note that since this is a virtual assembly, there may be delays in sound and image at some point, so we thank you in advance for your patience and understanding. It is important to note also that you authorized the stock exchange to use your data for the adequate development of this assembly. And now I will briefly explain the procedure to vote the different points of the agenda. In the platform, you will find all the motions that will be the subject of voting. The voting functionality of a vote will be activated once we announce that the voting is open. The voting will be open for the lapse of time decided by the Secretary of the Assembly. You should use the activate motion icon at the right side, upper right side of your screen. And then you will find the list of shareholders linked to their credentials and the options. The options will be without a vote, in favor, against, and abstention. For those points having to do with the election of the board of directors, the options would be list number 1, list number 2, blank, and abstention. If you represent several shareholders, you will have the following 2 options. First, select the vote option individually for each one of them. And second, if all of them are going to vote for the same option, then you should click on the box at the left on name and last names, and then you should decide if you use a mass vote and or individual. If you use mass vote, you will find a control warning asking you if you are sure that you want to use the mass vote option. If you do not pick one of the options, then it would be taken as an abstention. In any case, while the voting is open, you can change your decision by selecting the column to the right. Once the voting is closed, you will not be able to change your vote. Once the voting is finished, the secretary will inform about the result. If you have any problems, please do not hesitate to consult our assistance section in the upper right hand of the platform. During the session, at the times determined by the chairman, you may participate in the assembly by using the raise the hand functionality of the Zoom platform, which is located on the menu in the lower part of the screen in the option actions. Raise the hand. The chairman will authorize your participation and providing access to the microphone and the camera. For each point in the agenda and according to the regulations of the assembly, the interventions that the chairman deems necessary will be allowed, and with a maximum of 5 minutes. No one will be able to participate more than twice for one single topic. In case of technical problems with the voting platform, then we will activate a contingency plan that has been previously designed. In this case, at the corresponding time, we will provide instructions for voting. Also, in case that there are technical inconveniences with the Zoom platform that prevent the development of the assembly, we have foreseen a contingency plan that will allow us to continue the session in a different platform. In case this is required, we will send you the message to your corresponding emails, the ones that you registered during pre-registration. For this reason, please be attentive to your emails in case that this is necessary. Second point, appointment of the chairman and secretary of the assembly, paragraph Article 36 of the bylaws. According to paragraph 1 of the statutes or bylaws of the stock exchange, it is up to the chairman of the board of directors, Dr. Cosiro Rojas, to preside this assembly. Thank you, Dr. Velandia. According to Articles 36 and 71 of the social bylaws, the secretary of the assembly will be the vice president and secretary general of the society, Dr. Alberto Velandia Rodriguez. Third point, reading and consideration of the agenda. The proposed agenda for the assembly is as follows. First, quorum verification. Second, appointment of the chairman and secretary of the assembly. Third, reading and consideration of the agenda. 4, appointment of the commissions for ballot counting and for the review and approval of the minutes. 5th, approval of the management report of the board of directors and the president of BBC for year 2020, including A, corporate governance report, B, audit and risk committee report. 6th, reports from the external auditor. 7th, approval of financial statements, standalone and consolidated for 2020. 8th, study and approval of the establishment of reserves and profit distribution motion. 9th, approval of statutory reform. A, power to authorize the execution of contracts. B, adoption of country code recommendations. 10th, election of independent members of the board of directors for the statutory period 2021-2023. 11th, election of members who do not have the status of, as independents of the board of directors for the statutory period 2021-2023. 12, determination of fees for the members of the board of directors. 13th, election of the external auditor for the statutory period 2021-2023 and approval of budget appropriations for its management. 14th, corporate social responsibility annual donations program. 15th, shareholder proposals, Article 44 of the social bylaws. I informed the shareholders that the call for the assembly was made by the president of the stock exchange with the authorization of the board of directors, and that it was made in advance by press releases published on page 5 of the La Repubblica Daily and through electronic means according to what has been established with Article 33 of the bylaws. I also inform you that the documents referred to in Article 446 of the Trade Code were published on the website as of March 4, 2021. On the other hand, the books and other, the ledgers and other evidence required by law have been available to the shareholders at the offices of the stock exchange for the time established in the legal in the regulations. Similarly, information on the points to be submitted to the assembly decision were published in a timely manner on the website of BBC. In addition to the above, I inform you that for those shareholders who were unable to register in advance to participate in this assembly, the exchange has made available a mechanism that allows them, for information purposes and to comply with the recommendations established in the Code of Best Corporate Best Practices of Colombia, to follow the development of the assembly to the platform indicated on the website. Thank you, Dr. Velandia. Now we put to the consideration of the shareholders the approval of this agenda. Shareholders, from this moment on, we open the voting. Please select the update motion button on the assembly platform. When you see that the motion has been opened, select the menu to the right to see the options for voting. Pero, ¿cierto que están hablando muy rápido?
Rápido, es que está leyendo.
No,
está
pero ¿por
leyendo.
dónde va?
A ver, yo, pues,
Inform the shareholders that at this moment we are closing the voting. We now close the voting and we proceed to count the votes. Mr. Secretary, please inform about the results of the voting. Mr. Chairman? We had 1 million. A percentage of 97.3%, and for this reason, the motion has been voted favorably. Okay, thank you. Please proceed to read the next point of the agenda. Fourth, appointment of the commissions for ballot counting and for the review and approval of the minutes. According to what has been established in Article 11 of the regulations of the Assembly, we must designate a commission for counting the votes and for the review and approval of the minutes. For this reason, the Board of Directors proposes the following names: Diana Margarita Suarez, Carlos Aldana, and Mr. Juan Manuel Velasco. Now we submit for the approval of the shareholders the appointment of this commission for ballot counting and approval of the minutes. Shareholders, as of this moment, we open the voting. Please select the icon update motions on the platform, and once you see that it is open, select the arrow to the right to display voting selections or choices. In a few seconds, we will close the voting of this point of the agenda. We inform you that the voting has been closed. Dr. Velandia, please proceed to inform the results of the voting. Mr. Chairman, the motion has been approved with a voting in favor of 3,900 with 41 with 1,526,583. The motion has been approved. Mr. Secretary, please proceed to read the next point in the agenda. Fifth, approval of the management report of the Board of Directors and the President of BVC for year 2020. I give the floor to Dr. Juan Pablo Cordova, President of BVC, to read the report that had already been distributed to the shareholders for consultation during the period established by law for this purpose. Likewise, it is noted that the management report includes a corporate governance report and the audit and risk committee report. Dr. Cordova.
Thank you, Dr. Rosillo. Year 2020, as you all know, it was a challenging year. And before talking about what happened in 2020, I want to change that the impacts of the pandemics in the life of the nation was, first, to ensure the continuity of the financial statements. That was the most important discussion we had when we were talking about closures and of economic activity and mobility in the country, to ensure continuity of the financial statements and to work in coordination with the financial superintendency. The truth is that we can see this with satisfaction because continuity was achieved in the markets. Second element that was challenging during the year was to ensure the health and security of all our collaborators and their families. It was important to do that emphasis, not only the people that work with us, but their environment and their families. And I should also report that this was achieved in a very fast manner. In March, 100% of the persons of the organization were working remotely. So there were no concentration of people at the offices, and all the work and the services provided by the brokers and the BBC could be operated from their homes. Then I will talk about the main elements of the management report. So I will just do a summary of the main elements that are contained in our management report. I want to remind you of some strategies that in 2020 there were some important adjustments made. I have been sharing this with you. First thing is the connection center of the companies and for the transformation of the capitals market and in our country. So in BBC, we want all the persons find solutions for their needs. We have 6 pillars in our strategy that you well know. Obviously, our core business, the deepening of the capitals market. We are seeking the conversion in a 100% digital market with innovation. And this is indispensable as a strategic indicator with this purpose. The purpose of the vertical integration of last year, I will comment to you. There was important progress to obtain a single strategic approach, a commercial one, and in the capitals market from that structure. And we're doing very well. We're progressing in the regional integration, looking forward to generate a greater scale in the capitals market and obtain more participation and visibility in the financial market. And to continue promoting our corporation, not only at the level of the BBC, but in all the participants of the market. I will highlight here the main features achieved in 2020. This is a selective list. It does not contain all the events of 2020, but I will highlight the deepening of the core business, the promotion of the capitals market. The main message here is that we sent a message to the country and the entrepreneurs of the country that the capitals market is an alternative source, a mandatory source for almost all the countries that should take this into consideration, especially at this time of the pandemics where the cash of the companies has been so stressed. And the financial solutions through the capitals market is a very attractive alternative for the companies for the long term that allow them to release their cash. We had issues for special transactions. In May, 1 billion pesos emissions, and in the clearance also. What deals with issues, we had a fairly good year as compared to 2019, and also in number of issuers, we increased the number. In other advances, we finally approved the adoption, the central clearinghouse of variable income, and also the migration of the with the central counterparty clearing and the foreign currency clearing. And this is the compliance of Colombia with the national standards through the clearing houses. And finally, at the end of the year, we announced the administration of the Colcap index. We want to give it more visibility and more credibility globally. So Colombia can be seen as a country that is complying with the best standards. And we will start in May of this year with the index managed by here. What deals with the digital capitals market, as you know, in 2019, 2020 was the first year of operation of the digital reform. The truth is that the response of the participants and the shareholders was extraordinary. We had many campaigns financed with more than 800,000 million pesos financed. The dematerialized notes that we were offering to the financial needs to facilitate the digital credit bodies. Well, this is the deposit. The DECEVAL has had an extraordinary performance, issuing a great recovery last year, and the issuance of 2.4 billion pesos in dematerialized notes. We are progressing in putting our platforms in the cloud, so every person in the world can have access to this Colombian issues. In technology and innovation, the most important issue to point out was the disinvestment that we did in Sophos. It was an investment made in 2015. It was very profitable and very favorable for our institution, but it was an investment 30,000 million pesos but we did this investment for 129,000 million pesos. The financial business was very good for the institution, but it was considered that due to the nature of the growth of the business, it was a good business, but it was getting away from the core of the business of the BBC, and what was convenient was to focus our core in business in the structure of the capitals market and then in financial activities. We will see the motion for the distribution of profits that is very interesting for the shareholders. And in innovation, we have been using different tools implementing the technology items. Other important issues of 2020 was precisely the consolidation of the private infrastructure of the capitals market, under the BVC. As has been reported to the market, we acquired the control of the central counterparty clearing last year. And in addition, in this December, we made the merger of the central counterparty clearing with the foreign currency clearing. The BVC, the DECEVAL, and the two clearing houses, they are consolidated under the BVC, and this gives us the satisfaction of having complied a very strategic issue, not only for the BVC, but for the Colombian capitals market, that we all know that this is the best organization, or the organization that has been recommended internationally. And what allows us to make an offer of integral services. And lastly, in the regional integration, I want to point out that the board of directors designated some members of the committee to participate in this committee of integration. And they met several times last year, and progress was achieved with auditing and the value proposals to obtain this regional integration. At the end of the year, we approved to go to the next step of the company for a proposal of exchanging with stock exchanges of other countries. So we also had important progress during 2020. After the vertical integration, the configuration of the group is as you see here in the left. We have the brokers and the national participation. Then we have 100% in the DECEVAL and the price providers, and about 55% of the participation of the central counterparty clearing. These are the main suppliers in the structure of the Colombian market. And we have two investments where we are not controlling parties, which is the ICAT, the broker of in the foreign currency market and derivatives market. And that's the platform of derivatives on power and energy. And the group is well consolidated now, and it is controlling the main infrastructures of the Colombian market. And that allows us to have a direct participation in the different stages of the chain, what deals with emissions, the fixed income, variable income, and to directly participate through the DECEVAL and the BVC, where all the financial assets of the country, all of these are, and foreign currency also, and in clearance and settlement is also taken into account, and in custody through the DECEVAL, we are in the securities market, in the fixed market. And what deals with information, all the companies of the group have been developing their businesses in making the assessment of assets, and this is key for the decision making of every day. In the integration of all the companies under the group strategy, we have made value offers to our clients, which is totally integrated and aligned with the idea of making our strategies stronger. And this will be wonderful for the clients, and particularly this stage where this is taking place towards a digital world that will benefit our clients so they can obtain the offer of products that we provide. In the financial aspect, it is important to state that for the closing of 2020, Sophos did not consolidate in the financial statements because the transactions will be consolidated in December. Sophos will not be consolidated. So we have the financial statements without Sophos consolidation. We have income for the figure you're seeing here. In a year that the difficulties we had in 2020, despite that, we had satisfactory results, EBITDA of all the figures are shown here, and the net profit incorporating not only the consolidation of Sophos, but the proceeds of Sophos sale. And it gives us a net profit in the consolidated statement of the part of the balance sheet. We have total assets for 779 151 million pesos, and then shareholders equity of, so the financial position is very solid and robust. And here we are proposing a dividend of 1,000 and some other 9.75%, which is a profitability on the price of the shares of 9.75%. That positions us as the company listed in the stock exchange with greatest profitability in 2021, given the results of the last year. What deals with the brokers, here's the name of each of the companies, and you can see the results of the 3 brokers that are the central counterparty risk that grew 70% in its income. A year very difficult, and the central counterparty continues growing, and it is recovering in these 3 years with an extraordinary performance in 2020, and set ICAP in the market of the derivatives OTC with a 19% increase. Not only the companies, but all the brokers also had an extraordinary performance. What deals with derivatives, we have continued with strategies of entailing new shareholders and participants of the market to our company. We already have 3 additional shareholders in addition to the founders, and we are in the process of entailing a 4th one to have full operation in this 2021. In markets, as I mentioned before, in issuers, we had a very good year, not only in numbers, but in that positioning to the community, the financial community of the country, where the companies gave a very important message to the capitals market and invited to find attractive options in the market. And I wish to highlight that in the combination between the traditional market and the capitals market, we are having a value offer where practically every company in Colombia can have access to this. This is a medium and small size companies that could have access also to the secondary market. With this, we see the number of companies. We have 76 companies that started in the capitals market last year. This is a record for the Colombian capitals market. Traditionally, we had between 20 and 25 companies. Last year, we had an increase of 37 transactions in the main market, but in addition with 39 companies more. We had financings that went from 100 million pesos that financed a minor amount, and we reached 1 million pesos. So all the range in the capitals market, in strategic market, is being met. This is a clear message of the commitment that we're having from the BBC to give more access to the capitals market in Colombia. The results here were not so satisfactory as reported. According to the situation, is that the volumes were very affected last year. Practically all, with the except of the derivatives and OTC, had large drops. In foreign currency 17% and fixed rent 11%. The derivatives OTC had an important growth of 4%. In clearance and settlement, there was an important year also with the clearinghouse. More than 2,000 billion pesos were liquidated during the year. That's a material firm with an increase of 22%. And the assets, the open position at the clearinghouse well, this company is providing a very important service as reflected in the flows. We had a drop at the end of the year, given that during the second and third quarter of the assets was strong. I wish to point out also that the LTC of the Colgap index, despite of the behavior of the stock exchange capitalization, this had also a record figure of 12% in the year. And this index of Colombia, or the EPS of Colombia, is very well positioned according to these results, in one of the best in Latin America. We continue adding assets to the valuation. We are evaluating more than 100,000 assets in all the business lines. The transaction part did not operate as well, but it is recovering. But it's important to see the recovery of the volumes in 2020. What deals with sustainability, I wish to point out some elements. First, we continue seeing our sustainable BBC. We have green emissions, and this have been very well accepted, of about 1 billion pesos. We continue improving the reporting standards of our participants in the market, and in particular, we have 33 companies with the acknowledgement of in the Colombian listing by 2 issuers, but the incorporation as of this year of all the sustainability and efforts, and as of this year, it is mandatory. In addition, last year we launched in the capitals market in association with GRIP. The stock exchange and its companies are offsetting the carbon footprint, and this year we are going to be certified as carbon neutral. Last year, due to the situation of the country, we also resorted to our solidarity as enterprise and as a company. We did grants or donations of 19 million pesos in our normal programs that we had of social responsibility, but we added extraordinarily the financing of tests of the COVID program through the Andes University. And also we did some donations to improve the UCs in some hospitals. We contributed in this with these donations, and I want to recognize the participation of the Directive Council and of all the members of our board of directors. They contributed part of their fees for this cause, and the employees of the organization also make voluntary donations to these cases. Finally, I wish to point out our commitment with our employees. We had a significant improvement in our grading in Reuters, and we passed a favorable ranking, and we certified as a responsible company, and practically we're complying with gender equality with 53%, which means a commitment with our employees, improving the family environment of all the persons. And in corporate governance, I wish to point out the cooperation and permanent support of the board of directors, and in particular in this year, we did the migration, which was totally virtual, with the other meetings of the council, of the board. I wish to point out that this person, the member of the board of directors, for 15 years passed away, and he contributed a lot to this organization, and we want to render him our thanks. Here you have the confirmation of the Directive Council and the committees. I wish to point out some elements of the committees of the people that were with us during 2020. In the case of the Financial and Administrative Committee, or the accompaniment for the disinvestment of Sohos and valuation, and what deals with the risks and audit committee, and the strengthening of operation of our services and improving the availability of our systems. And in the case of Corporate Governance Committee, the accompaniment of our integration chief of the stock exchanges has been key. And obviously, all the topics of the governance of the organization. Those are the main elements of the report. I don't know if you have any questions in this regard. Thank you, Dr. Cordova, for the report. Having heard this report, we reiterate that you can find it in the webpage of the stock exchange, and it is at the disposal of the shareholders. I request the secretary to please update the quorum. And yes, Mr. Chairman, I inform you that at this time, 51,244 shares are present, which are equal to 34% of the. No, there is enough quorum to validly deliberate and decide. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Is there any question in the system? Dr. Cordova? There's no questions. Then we submit for the consideration of the shareholders a management report of the board of directors of the chairman of the board corresponding to 2020. Shareholders, as of this time, the voting is open. Please select the button update the voting in the platform. Once you have selected this, select the arrow for the options to vote. In a few seconds, the voting will be closed. We are informing that voting is being closed now. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Please indicate the results of the voting. Mr. Chairman, I wish to inform you that with the favorable vote of 43,439,516 outstanding shares that are equivalent to 84.7%, the management report has been approved by the Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Please proceed with the next point of the agenda. Sixth point, reports of the external auditor. Dr. Gloria Margarita Amaecha Garcia, main external auditor of the firm KPMG. Please proceed. Good morning, everybody. I will present the reports and I will read the conclusion of each of the reports. For the financial statements, the standalone ones, we made reports, one that deals with the financial statements and the other one for internal control. And Alberto, I don't know if you have there the reports, please. On the standalone financial statements, the reasonability of the financial statements, we validated some important aspects, which is the responsibility of the administration vis-a-vis the presentation and the preparation of the financial statements, the accounting standards accepted in Colombia, the responsibility of the external auditor of obtaining sufficient evidence for the auditing, applying international auditing standards accepted in Colombia. And there's an important point requested from Standard 701. We want to include key issues in our report. Those are the relevant issues that in the judgment of the auditor should be taken into consideration for the work. These key matters that we determined for the standalone financial statements, as mentioned by Dr. Juan Pablo Córdoba, are the purchase of the shares of the Central Counterparty Clearinghouse to obtain the control of that company. And the other key issue was the sale of the shares of Supercolution SAS. Here we will be explaining why do we consider that this is a key audit issue and the procedures that were carried out. I will read the conclusion of the reasonability of the financial statements. In my opinion, the standalone financial statements were prepared in accordance with the information truly taken from the books and attached hereto, reasonably present all the material aspects of the financial statements separated from the BBC as 2020 and their separate cash flows as of the same date, according to accounting standards and audit standards accepted in Colombia, uniformly applied vis-a-vis the previous year. Now we will go to ISAC 3000. It mentions numerals 1 and 3 of Article 209 of the Commercial Code, where it not only mentions the internal control matters, but compliance by the administrators with the bylaws and the decisions of the Assembly. And I will read the conclusion. In my opinion, what you are projecting is the consolidated financial statements, and I will read. In my opinion, the acts of the administrators abide by the bylaws and the decisions of the Assembly, and they are adequate. The internal control measures and the conservation and custody of the company or of third parties in its custody are adequate in all material aspects, as defined in Title I, Chapter 4 of Basic Legal Circular of the Financial Superintendents. This opinion is also regarding the consolidated financial statements. Likewise, we include the key auditing issues that, in addition to the ones that I already mentioned about the purchases of the clearinghouse and the sale of Sophos, it includes the evaluation of the deterioration of what was registered from the CEVAL and from the clearinghouse. And I will read the conclusion of the consolidated financial statements. In my opinion, the consolidated financial statements attached here to reasonably represent in all material aspects the financial consolidated situation of the group as of 2020, the results of its operations and its cash flows consolidated for the year ended in that date, according to accounting standards and applied in Colombia, uniformly applied with regard to the previous year. Thank you, Dr. Gloria, for your report. Once we have read the report of the external auditor, I request the secretary to read the next point of the agenda. 7th, approval of the standalone and consolidated financial statements corresponding to 2020. I informed the general status that complying with the relevant standards, these statements corresponding to 2020 were submitted for the consideration of the Auditing Committee on Risks of the BBC on the 23rd of February and to the Board of Directors on the 24th of the same February of the same year. And they were authorized to submit them for the consideration of the Assembly. I informed the attendants that all the financial statements were at your disposal since the 4th of March, 2020, through the web page of the stock exchange at the offices of the company. I give the floor to Dr. Diego Fernandez, the Financial Vice President of the Stock Exchange, so he can explain the standalone and the consolidated financial statements as of 2020. Likewise, I am informing all the shareholders that the financial statements, you can find them in the management report available at the web page. Please proceed. Thank you, Dr. Rosillo. Good morning. I will present a brief summary of the financial statements that are at the disposal of the shareholders since the 24th of March. We will stand with the standalone financial statements. Although we see a slight difference in the income of 5% in the management, Dr. Cordova already explained this, but it allowed this to reduce the expenses. It resumes the profit of the business to 13,448 in profit, in operating profit, which exceeds that of 2019. And the most relevant issues submitted herein is to submit the profit from the Sofus sale, which was nearly 87,000 pesos, and the adjustment of the valuation of the presentations at the clearinghouse when at the beginning of the consolidation. We have the historical cost, and with this adjustment, this gave us nearly 30,000 pesos of additional income. And the other important point that also was mentioned by Dr. Cordova was the performance of the different brokers associated. That was very positive, in about 30 million pesos that were added to the results. This gives us a net result after taxes of 170,000 million, with a very positive performance of the year. The next one, please. In the balance sheet figures, I'm not going to go into detail, but I want to highlight that the most important changes took place in the current assets. The current assets increased and by 110,000 million pesos. And the operation that was closed, the transaction that was closed as of the end of December, was the most material change. But anyhow, the cash flow was permanently solid, particularly last year. The shareholders' equity in liabilities, there was no material change. The shareholders' equity is derived mainly by the increase of the profit, which is around 225,000 pesos, million pesos. This has an impact that arrives to 633,000 million pesos. Next one, please. These are details of the accounts of the assets, liabilities. No. This is the cash flow summary of the three activities. As I mentioned in the analysis, the position of cash flow was very material last year, and it is very related to the sale and closing of Sofus transaction. The next one in the list of changes in shareholders' equity, the most important topics was the generation here of the profit of 225,000 million pesos, and the reserve that we established. Those two factors increased the shareholders' equity of the company. Continue, please. This is the presentation of the consolidated financial statements. And the consolidated statements here, we see the factors that were analyzed here are the same that I have mentioned. The impact of the valuation of the clearinghouses, and the good performance of the BBC and Deceval performance of the, and also the Central Counterparty Clearinghouse. It arrives to 199,000 million pesos, with a final result of 66,000 million pesos, as you see in the chart. And for the effects of accounting standards, we separated the operation of Sofus and the profit generated by Sofus in a chapter that is called discontinued operations, where the profit of the 80,000 million pesos arrived. And now we have a net profit of 153 million pesos in the consolidated financial statement. So, as I said, I will not detain here in more details of the balance sheets. As the president of the BBC said, that they were at the disposal of the shareholders, everything regarding the assets and the balance sheet and liabilities. I wish to highlight that when the clearinghouse was consolidated, this deals with the transactions that are operated of the risk clearinghouse. As you can see, there's the same value in the assets and in the liabilities. But since we consider that the clearinghouse is present at the balance sheets, here we see important figures of 65 million pesos in the assets. But for practical purposes, if we see this balance sheet separating this transaction, we have the same situation that we had in the standalone financial statements. Let us continue. These are details of the balance sheet accounts, consolidated ones. They have the same indications that I pointed out in the other balance sheet. And cash flow, we can see the changes in the shareholders' equity. Here, the large effect. I wish to close the presentation of the financial statements following the instructions of external circular of the Financial Superintendence of Colombia, and is to inform the Assembly on the adjustments that we do year by year, dealing with the adoption of the IFRS in 2014, and the cost of our fixed assets in property, and the evaluation that we made in 2014. The difference is a difference in favor. It won't be distributable. It deals with the useful life of the with the property. We do some annual adjustments. In this case, for 2019 and 2020, the total approved by this was 152 million pesos. This figure is not relevant in the books, but it is the obligation of the administration to present this to the Assembly and to clarify that these are adjustments that do not affect the results. Mr. Chairman, here I conclude the summary of the standalone and consolidated financial statements. Thank you, Diego. I ask the shareholders if there is any question for Dr. Fernandez regarding this point of the agenda. There are no questions. So, having made the above presentation by the BBC administration, I remind you that the financial statements were published in the webpage of the BBC, and that, as already indicated, they were placed at the disposal of the shareholders with due precedence. Due to the above this, we submit for the consideration of the Assembly the standalone and consolidated financial statements for 2020. We remind the shareholders that unless the cases of legal representation, the shareholders or people that are not independent cannot vote. As of this time, voting is open. Please select the button update voting, and once this is open, select the arrow on the right side to see the menu of the different options for voting.
The voting will be closed in a few seconds. Oh, 8. Study and approval of reserves and profit distribution motion. This has been authorized by the Directive Board of the BVC on March 2nd, 2021. I give the floor to Dr. Juan Pablo Córdoba to present the corresponding proposal for the distribution of profits. Okay, the one that you see are the distribution of profits motion approved for recommendation by the committee and the board of directors of the BBC after analyzing the organization's situation. Okay, so you have on the screen the different figures: profit before taxes, the income tax, and complementary. So the proposal is an occasional reserve of, as you can see on the fourth line of the slide. So 33,665 million pesos correspond to the ordinary dividend, corresponding to 100% of the ordinary profits without taking into account the extraordinary ones for 2020 that have been reported in the previous presentations, and to distribute approximately 50% of the profit, net profit as a product of the sale of Sophos as extraordinary dividend. Everything is on the screen. So it would be at the market price as of 31st of December. So the dividend per share would be on the final line of the slide, and the dividends should be paid in 2 installments, the ordinary one and the extraordinary, to be paid on April the 30th of 2021, 80%, and August the 30th, the remaining 50%. The dividends will be paid to shareholders, at the active shareholders at the time of payment, and considering that the payment will be made in 2 installments, and it will be paid during the following dates, April 26th and April the 30th, and that would be the first period of payment. And between August the 24th and August the 30th of 2020. So that would be the motion, Mr. President, payable in 2 installments on April the 30th and August the 30th. Thank you, Mr. Cordova. And now I ask the shareholders if you have any questions or comments. So now we put into consideration this motion for the distribution of profits, and we remind you that this motion and the establishment of the reserve was authorized by the Board of Directors on March 2, 2021. Shareholders, as of this moment, we open the voting. Please select the icon update motion on the platform. Once you see that it is open, select the arrow on the right side to display the menu for voting. In a few seconds, we will be closing the voting. We inform you that the voting has been closed. Thank you. Someone has raised his or her hand. One moment, please. Dr. Roberto Belchor has raised his hand. Dr. Roberto, please proceed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My screen has not been updated for this particular point. Thank you, Dr. Belchor. So I ask the technical team to please look into this. Mr. Chairman, the technical team informs that this problem has been solved. Dr. Belchor can now enter and vote. Thank you, Dr. Valandia. Mr. Roberto Belchor has raised his hand. Mr. Chairman, please go ahead, Mr. Belchor. The truth is that my screen is frozen. I am not able to vote, to do any mass vote because it does not allow me. So the screen is frozen. I'll try to refresh. I'll try to refresh the page. Yes, please refresh the screen so that you can vote. Otherwise, we will find another solution. Okay, it's fine now. It's okay. Please excuse me for the inconvenience. Excellent. It's very good. Thank you. Okay. After closing the voting, Mr. Secretary, please inform about the results. Yes. Yes, 1 second, please. We are processing the information. We have the results now, Mr. Valendia. Yes, Mr. Chairman. So I inform the Assembly that the project for the distribution of profits and the reserves has been approved by a favorable vote of 47,199,710 shares, equivalent to 84% of the Assembly. So it has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And please read the next point in the agenda. Ninth, approval of the statutory reform. Thank you, Mr. Velandia. So I give the floor to you for the presentation of this reform. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This statutory reform motion has been previously evaluated by the Corporate Governance Committee and the Board of Directors, as recommended by the shareholders meeting. So the proposed statutory reforms covers two issues. The first related to the approval of actual contracts by the company's administrative board, depending on the amount of such contracts. In particular, it is proposed to modify Article 50, number 11 of the functions of the board of directors in order to increase the amount of approval authority by the board of directors to 2.5 billion, and to enable the delegation of this function in the committee to be designated by the council. It also provides for the possibility for the president to authorize additions or extensions of contracts authorized by the delegated committee without exceeding the amount and time limit initially envisaged. Article 52D, in order to specify that the function of approving contracts does not require this qualified majority, and Article 58B to state that it is the function of the president to execute the company's acts or contracts, including those amounting to more than 2.5 billion, which have been previously approved by the board of directors or the designated committee. Similarly, in accordance with the amendments to Article 50-11, it is specified that the president may approve additions or provisions of contracts authorized by the council without exceeding the amount and time initially envisaged. The second aspect covered by the statutory reform is intended to incorporate into the statutes of the company that complies with the recommendation of the country code in the following areas. Article 62, in order to express within the qualities and incompatibilities of the external auditor, that the board of directors may not propose for appointment to the General Shareholders Assembly tax external auditor firms that have been disabled, suspended, or any other type of penalization for the exercise of financial audit services imposed by a judge or regulatory and or supervisory authority, therefore fully adopting recommendation 29.8 of the country code and the addition of numbers 12 to Article 71 to include as a function of the chairman of the board of directors to ensure that the board of directors focuses on the status and definition of strategic direction, therefore fully adopting recommendation 18.1 of the country code in accordance with the recommendations of the corporate best practices of the country code and with the code of good governance of the stock exchange. It is appropriate to submit to the Assembly the statutory reform dividend into into two groups of issues on the that relate substantially to different issues. One, amendments related to the topics of approval of contracts, and two, the topics related to the incorporation of the statutes of recommendation of the country code in the event. Thank you, Dr. Velandia. I ask the Assembly if there are any questions. There being no question, then Mr. Secretary, since there are no other motions to vote separately on each of the articles, please submit to the vote. Shareholders, as of this moment, we open the voting to decide if the statutory reform of articles number 50, 11, 52B, and 58B relating to the approval of the execution of contracts and acts is approved. Please proceed with the voting method. Once open, please select the arrow to the right to display the voting options. Dr. Juan Pablo Galan has raised his hand. Dr. Galan, please proceed. Hello, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Oh, technical problems. My screen has frozen. I'm refreshing. I don't know if this problem is only with me or any other shareholders have the same problem. Okay, we are checking with the technical team. Maybe it's the internet, but we will take all the time necessary to update the screen and to do the voting. Dr. Margarita Suarez, please proceed. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Same technical problem as Mr. Galan. Understood? Dr. Melchor, please proceed. Thank you. Same problem. My page cannot refresh. Okay, we have several people with a hand raised. We suppose that it is the same problem, same issue. Dr. Aura Maria, Dr. Cristina, Mr. Aldana. Yes, I refreshed the screen again, and there must be a problem because I cannot do anything. Okay, so all the comments go in the same direction, so we will do our best here with the technical team, and we will be informing you in a few seconds. The technical team informs that we are in the process of verifying to make sure that the inconveniences are solved. So we will keep the voting module open for the time being. So we ask you to bear with us for a few more seconds. Thank you for your patience. Mr. Chairman, they tell me that the problem has been solved and everyone is now proceeding to vote. So we are um, asking you to refresh your screens and then proceed to vote. Mr. Chairman, please proceed, Roberto. No, the refresh button has been disabled, so I cannot do anything. It does not allow me to refresh the page. Okay, they will. Okay, the technical team will be calling you to solve this technical issue. Thank you. Okay, I asked the shareholders if you were able to vote. They are telling us that the system is working. Dr. Pardo, please go ahead. Okay, we cannot vote. We still cannot vote, so the problem persists. There are several hands that have been raised. Good morning to all. Yes, I faced the same problem. What I did was I exited the page and I entered again. They sent me a new code to my email. It took a little while, but I was able to vote. But it took a little bit longer. But the solution was to exit and then enter again. And they sent me a code to my email. Thank you for your feedback. Mr. Montoya also has raised his hand. Yes, just as Carlos, that same procedure worked. and I was able to vote. Thank you. Okay, it's good that it's working. Is there anyone else who has not been able to vote at this moment? Margarita Garcia has raised her hand. Please proceed. Mr. Secretary, please make sure that Margarita Garcia can vote. Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are checking. Okay, we have the same problem with Cristina. I haven't been able to vote either. My page cannot refresh. Mr. Pardo, please go ahead while the technical team works. Mr. Chairman, to ask for a minute, we are just receiving the code, so we haven't been able to vote yet. So please give us a few more seconds. Okay, we'll take sufficient time for you to be able to vote. Thank you. We inform the shareholders that we are in the process of verifying the issues. Please do not worry until we verify that everything is all right. We will keep the voting open so that you will be able to vote. Shareholders, we have 96% of the voting. I wish to know if any one of you has, if any one of you has had any more inconveniences in voting. No. Okay, Mr. Chairman, we inform the Assembly that we have closed the voting of this part of the statutory reform. We will now proceed to tabulate. Mr. Velandia, will you please inform about the results of the voting? Yes, Mr. Chairman, we inform the Assembly that with the vote of 46,403,894 shares, equivalent to 90.55 of the quorum, this part of the statutory reform has been approved. Shareholders, as of this moment, we open the voting to decide whether to approve the statutory reform of Articles 62 and Section 12 of Article 71 relating to the adoption of recommendations of the country code. Please select the update button on the Assembly platform. Once you see that it is open, please select the arrow to the right for the menu to display. We are verifying, we are aware that there are some observations. We are checking the process. Please do not be concerned. Only until we have verified everything, we will not close the voting. So please bear with us for just a few moments. We remind you that the point that we are voting is the second part of the statutory reform. The technical team informs that this is in the lower section. We are voting on the 9th point having to do with the statutory reform. The first segment of modifications has been approved. We are right now voting for the second segment of the reform. That's the option that you have to refresh on your screen in order to vote. Please make sure, those who have not yet voted, please make sure that you are in the second part of point number 9 of the agenda. I ask all the shareholders to raise your hands if you have not been able to vote so that our team can identify you and then find a solution, a quick solution. We inform that the point being voted on is 9B, located in the second page. You can find it in the second page. Only 2 shareholders are pending vote. Now we have a voting of 91.58%. We have 96% of the voting. If there is Anyone else who has not been able to vote, please say so right now. All right. So we close the voting right now, and we will process the information. Okay, so we are attentive to the result. Mr. Secretary, please inform the results of the voting. Yes, Mr. Chairman, with a favorable vote of 45,840,346 shares, equivalent to 89.45% of the votes. And the second segment of topics to be amended in the bylaws has been approved by the majority. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Please proceed to read the next point in the agenda. 10th point. Election of independent members of the Board of Directors for the statutory period 2021-2023. Please name the nominees. Independent. Now you will find the names of those who were nominated and who are independent, and those brokers who nominated them. Valores Bancolombia S.A., comisionista de bolsa, BTG Pactual S.A., comisionista de bolsa, Credit Corp Capital Colombia, por venir. Rafael Aparicio Escayón, María Jimena, Credit Corp Capital Colombia S.A., Juan Pablo Ganalo Tálera, Porvenir S.A., Santiago Montenegro Trujillo. I repeat the names. The corporate committee at its meeting on March 1st, 2021 of the general qualities and special conditions, after verification of the names, stated that the nominees are to be considered as independent members of the board of directors. Mr. Chairman, two lists were posted. Number one by Comisionista Valores de Colombia, and list number two jointly presented by DTG Pactual S.A., and all the lists are made up by persons who have been previously qualified as eligible by the Committee of Corporate Governance, and this has been also verified by the Secretary General. The lists are: list number one, presented by Valores de Colombia S.A., Comisionista de Bolsa. First, Rafael Aparicio Escayón. Two, Santiago Montenegro Trujillo. Third, Federico Rongifo Vélez. Four, María Ángela Suárez Londoño. Fifth, María Jimena Escayón Ordóñez. List number two, presented by B13 S.A., Brasil Bolsa Balcao, and BTG Pactual Comisionista de Bolsa. One, Juan Rafael Pérez Vélez. Two, Juan Pablo Galano Tálara. In this point, it is necessary to remind the attendees that the voting options for the points relating to the election of members of the board of directors are list number one and list number two, blank and abstention. Shareholders, as of this moment, we open the voting. Please select the button Update Motion on the platform
Once you visualize the motions that showing that the voting is option, then click the arrow to the right to display the menu. Dr. Velandia, please take the necessary time to make sure that all attendees can vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be so. May I remind you that on the voting platform, there is a chat where technical assistance can be provided if you so require it. If you have any problems, the technical team will be ready to see to it that any problems are solved. We continue with the voting. There is no rush. Please take your time. I inform you that we already have 97% of the voting. I would like to know if any of the assembly attendees has not been able to vote so that we can solve the specific problem. Okay. We are now closing the voting. Okay, we are now closing the voting of this point. Mr. Secretary, please proceed and read the results of the voting. Mr. Velandia, please proceed and read the results of the voting. Yes, Mr. Chairman. We inform the Assembly that the result of the voting is as follows. Total valid votes, 49,461,039 shares. Number of posts to be provided, 7. With 7,765,872. List number 1 obtained 34,017,573 votes. List number 2 obtained 15,443 votes. Blank vote 0, abstentions 1,783,394 votes or shares. Consequently, the following candidates have been elected as members of the Board of Directors with an independent status for the statutory period 2020-2021. Rafael Aparicio Escayón, list number 1. Santiago Montenegro Trujillo, list number 1. Federico Rengifo Vélez, list number 1. María Fernanda Suárez Londoño, list number 1. Juan Rafael Pérez Vélez, list number 2. Juan Pablo Galán Otálora, list number 2. Maria Jimena Cadena Ordóñez, list number 1. Again, list number 1 for the latter. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Please proceed and read the next point in the agenda. 11th, election of members who do not have the independent status for the board of directors for the statutory period 2021-2023. Please tell us the names of those candidates who were nominated with a non-independent status. Okay, the names of those who were nominated as members without an independent status for the board of directors and those shareholders who nominated them. Valores de Colombia, Mauricio Rosillo Rojas, Germán Salar Castro, Carlos Alberto Rodríguez, Jaime Castañeda Roldán, and Aura Marleni Arcila Giraldo. B3SA Brasil Bolsa Balcao, Roberto Augusto Belchior da Silva. Universidad de Medellín, Aura Marleni Arcila Giraldo. The Corporate Government Committee verified the general qualities and special conditions of those aspiring to be considered as members without an independent member quality for members of the board of directors. Have any other lists have been inscribed for this election? Yes, 2 lists were presented. List number 1, presented by Valores de Colombia, S.A. Comisionista de Bolsa, and list number 2, presented jointly by shareholders B3 SA Brasil Bolsa Balcao and BTG Pactual SA Comisionista de Bolsa. Those were nominated as shown on the lists and that were declared eligible by the board of directors. The list presented are as follows. List number 1, presented by Valores Bancolombia S.A. Comisionista de Bolsa. 1, Mauricio Rosillo Rojas. 2, Germán Salazar Castro. 3, Carlos Alberto Rodríguez López. 4, Jaime Castañeda Roldán. 5, Aura Marleni Arcila Giraldo. List number 2, presented by B3 S.A. Brasil Bolsa Balcao, BTG Pactual S.A. Comisionista de Bolsa. Number 1, Roberto Augusto Belchior da Silva. Here it is pertinent to remind those present or attendees to this assembly that the options for voting of those points having to do with the election of the members of the board of directors are list number 1, list number 2, blank, and abstention. Shareholders, as of this moment, we open the voting. Please select the update motion button, and once it is shown that the motion is open, select the arrow to the right to display the menu for voting. Shareholders, at this moment, we have opened the voting. Just as in the previous point, Mr. Belandia, let's take all the time necessary so that everyone can exercise his or her right to vote. Mr. Juan Pablo Galan, you have raised your hand. Please express your comment. Mr. Chairman, thank you. They just to ask you to please repeat the two lists or to place them on the screen again. Yes, with pleasure, we'll do it right away. I informed the shareholders that we already have 97% of the vote. If anyone has not had the opportunity to vote, please tell us so. Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, this being so, we inform the Assembly that the voting process is being closed right now. We will proceed to tabulate the results. Mr. Secretary, please inform the results of the voting. Mr. Chairman, I inform the Assembly that total valid votes 49,982,081 votes or shares. Number of posts to 6. So list number 1 obtained 35,461,659 votes. List number 2 obtained 14,520,422 votes. Blank votes, 0. Abstentions, 1,955,956 votes. Consequently, the following candidates have been elected as members of the Board of Directors who do not have the independent status for the statutory period 2021-2023. Members who do not have the independent status: Mauricio Rosillo Rojas, Germán Salazar Castro, Carlos Alberto Rodríguez López, Jaime Castañeda Roldán, Roberto Augusto Belchior da Silva, Aura Marleni Arcila Giraldo. That was the decision taken by the Assembly and the official results. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Please proceed to read the next point in the agenda.
12th point of the agenda, determination of the fees of the members of the Board of Directors. In compliance with the remuneration policy of the Board of Directors, according to which the annual adjustments must be equal to the increase of the consumer price index, all aspects have been taken into account. It is proposed to maintain the current remuneration. And then we are establishing a scale of fees for each member and for each session. The base fees for the session of the board and for the committees for the period 2021 and March 2022 correspond to a value of 3,234,000 pesos. Likewise, for 2022-2023, it is proposed to maintain the annual increase policy and make the corresponding adjustment to the consumer price index of 2021. We submit for the consideration of the attendance the proposal for the determination of the fees of the members of the Board of Directors. Shareholders, as of this time, the voting is open. Please select the button Update Motion in the platform. Once it is seen that this is open, select the arrow to obtain the different options on number 3. We thank you, and we thank you for your patience. And we are indicating that the platform system is operating adequately. We know that the voting has not been able to open in this point, so we thank you to wait a while because they're consulting on the technical issues. I will inform when the voting process for this point is ready. Dr. Margarita. Having overcome the inconvenient, now it is qualified for voting in this point of the agenda. We remind you that we are voting the fees point, which is the 12th point of the agenda for the board of directors, for the members. At this time, the possibility of voting is already open. Mr. Secretary, let's close the voting. So we inform the attendants that at this time, the voting is closed for this point of the agenda, and we enter into the process of tabulation of the information. Mr. Secretary, let's proceed to show the results of the voting. So we inform that the motion for the determination of profits of the Board of Directors was approved with 42,954,115 votes that are equivalent to the 86% of the quorum with which this point has been approved by the Assembly. Let us continue, please, with the next point of the agenda. 13th, election of the external auditor for the period 2021-2022 and approval of the budget for their own management. Doctora Gloria, you have raised your hand. Good morning. I wish to leave the session so you can make your decision. Okay, thank you very much. Proceed. I give the floor to Diego Fernandez to expose the analysis of the proposal submitted for the external auditing, its remuneration and its management, and the recommendation to be made by the administration. Mr. Chairman, based on the standards issued by the superintendents, the administration invited two firms to participate for the period 2021 to 2023. These firms were Deloitte and Touche and KPMG, which is the current external auditor. Other two international firms, Waterhouse Price and E&Y, were not invited since they present a conflict of interest. They work with us, and that would represent a conflict of interest. I will give the analysis, the technical analysis and financial analysis. The administration recommends the appointment of KPMG, that's to renew the agreement. The value of the proposal is for 474,000 pesos, and this corresponds to the IPC increase. This is the proposal for the election of external auditors. Thank you, Dr. Diego. As you can see, the proposal includes the allocation of the budget of 476.94 million for the adequate performance of the fiscal auditing, and the increase for the next term will be that corresponding to the IPC. We submit for the consideration of the attendance the proposal of the auditing firm for the BBC for the statutory period 2021-2023 and the approval of the appropriation for the budget for its management. Shareholders, as of this time, the voting process is open for the election of the external auditor and the respective budget appropriation. Mr. Secretary, please indicate the results of the voting. Continue, Dr. Velandia, with the results, please. Okay, Mr. President, we inform the Assembly that the election of the external auditor and the budget appropriation was approved by 42,971,463 that are equivalent to 83.8% of the quorum. Mr. Secretary, please read the next point of the agenda. 14th. Program of entrepreneurial corporate responsibility and annual program for donations. I give the floor again to Dr. Diego Fernandez so he can explain to the shareholders the program of the entrepreneurial social corporate responsibility. You are in mute, Diego. Okay, Mr. Chairman. As a supplement to the presentation that Dr. Cordova made in the management report, the corporate social responsibility for 2020 had three important components, two of them dedicated to educational subjects and the other one to carbon footprint offsets. We are impacting more than 100 youngsters in the process of training for innovation in technology and digital matters. And in the International Committee for Education, we are granting scholarships for 32 students. We are taking care of the needs for software development. And for this type of work, the main common characteristics of these students are that they are of low income and they have high academic qualifications and results. In the third point of the carbon footprint offset, we have reached the sowing of 970 trees and compensated with 400 tons of CO2. We make the observation that we should continue strengthening these programs, not only in the educational portion for youngsters, but obviously to continue with the footprint carbon offset and to reach 100%. The request is to be able to implement and passing from 300 to 500 million pesos in 2021. And what we do every year is to approve the donations in kind of those assets that we have dropped from our financial assets. Thank you, Diego. We submit for the consideration of the shareholders the proposal of donations of the BVC. So we inform that as of this time, the voting is open following the procedure with which you have been acquainted throughout the assembly. Mr. Secretary, please indicate the results of the voting. Mr. President, then we close the process. And we are tabulating the information. We will soon report this, which is the last point of the agenda. Dr. Yes, Mr. Chairman, we inform the Assembly that the program of corporate social responsibility has been approved with 42,971,463 votes, which are equivalent to 83.8%. So this point has been approved. Mr. Secretary, please read the following point of the agenda. Mr. Chairman, 14th, motions of the shareholders, Article 44 of the bylaws. Taking into account that no proposals were received previously, so according to the bylaws of the BBC, we thank all the attendants. Wait a second. I thank all of you, your participation in this assembly. And this session is declared adjourned. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Thanks everybody for being present.